Hey, I'm Melissa.
And I'm Whitney.
We started this true crime podcast over a glass of wine and quickly turned from true crime listeners into true crime advocates.
So get comfy, pop a cork, and grab a glass because we have work to do.
This is Cults, Crimes, and Cabernet. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. It's been a week. I feel like we've just been hustling and bustling this week, but getting nowhere. Kind of like when you're running in peanut butter.
Yes, I've never heard that expression in my life, but I completely agree. It's our first real week back to work on the podcast.
It is.
So it's been playing catch up and then getting some new ideas, but it's going good.
Yeah. What we're looking forward to most coming up faster than we can imagine is in August, we are going to be at the True Crime Podcast Festival. And with it, we are getting some preparations made for it. Last year, we put out a call for any flyers for missing or unsolved cases. If you have a flyer and you have some printed out, you want them to be at our booth or in the attendees bags, please send them to us. Our address is P.O. Box 1213 in Manor, Texas. That's Manor, Texas 78653. We will hold on to them until August. We'll give you all the way until August to send them to us, and we will get them added to our bags and our table.
Perfect.
Anything we can do to help advocate, get some word out about any cases that you guys have or hold near and dear to your heart, let us know. We want to make sure we are spreading the word for you.
Awesome. I think that's about all we have going on as far as announcements.
Yep,
I
that's
can
about it.
jump over to my wine, which has a cute name. It's called Folly of the Beast. It's a Pinot Noir, and I haven't had one in quite a while. I took a sip and was shocked because it's pretty dry. It's a 2020 and it has a picture of a whale's fin on there. Super cute. It says, "For there is no folly of the beast of the earth, which is not infinitely outdone by the madness of men." And that's from Moby Dick.
I was going to ask, I knew it was from Moby Dick, and I was going to ask if that's why there was a whale fin on the front.
Yes. It's good. Obviously, it was pretty dry considering I haven't had wine in quite a while. You know how once you start drinking it, you can go drier and it's not too shabby. But when you're haven't had any in weeks and all of a sudden you drink pretty dry wine, it's a shock.
Yeah, it'll be a kick in the face there at first. Whoa.
Yeah. Yes. But it is delicious now that I've had a couple sips of it. I'm like, okay, I dig this.
Nice. All right, well, let's get into it.
All right. Bardstown, Kentucky is one of those small towns that most people in the true crime space know about, but not for a good reason. This small town of just over 13,000 people has a past like no other. The city was named after the Bard brothers, who obtained 1,000 acres and then planned out the town known as Bardstown today. The Kentucky Bourbon Festival brings over 50,000 people to Bardstown annually and is one of Kentucky's most prominent events. According to neighborhoodscout.com, Bardstown is only safer than 15% of all U.S. cities. The violent crime rate is pretty low, though. It is at a 1.1 per 1,000 residents, but just to give some comparison, the rest of Kentucky is at a 2.85, and the United States as a whole is around 4.0. So it seems like on the violent crime rate, it's pretty safe. There is a lot of property crime, and the fact that we're even talking about Bardstown that has a bunch of unsolved murders is going to play into their crime rate. If you haven't heard of it, Bardstown, Kentucky has had quite a few unsolved murders in the last few decades. I will briefly touch on all of them, but today's focus will be on the unsolved murder of Tommy Ballard. The first unsolved murder in Bardstown occurred in December of 2011 when Daniel Coho went missing. His family hadn't heard from him, but he was a grown up and he might be off camping or fishing. So they didn't really worry too much until Daniel didn't show up for Christmas with the family. Then on January 2nd of 2012, Daniel was found dead, shot execution style, in a barn in Spencer County, Kentucky. This county is next to Nelson County, which is the county that Bardstown is in. This is about 20 miles from his home there in Bardstown. On January 5th, Daniel's father was notified. His father described Daniel as a working man that loved the outdoors. He didn't have much money, and his father couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt him. The family stated Daniel didn't have any friends in Spencer County and really didn't have a reason to be in that area at all. So they believe he was taken there by his killers. 0 suspects or motives have ever been released, and this case seems to be classified as cold. The next unsolved murder occurred on May 25th, 2013. Officer Jason Ellis was killed while driving home after finishing his shift at the Bardstown Police Department. When he came upon branches blocking the road on exit 34 of the Bluegrass Parkway there in Bardstown, the fact that he was a police officer and an all-around good human being, he got out of his vehicle to clear the branches from the roadway. While attempting to remove the debris, he was shot several times. A passing motorist discovered Officer Ellis and used his radio to call authorities. But Officer Ellis would not survive this brutal trap. Ellis worked in the narcotics department and was a canine handler. He loved Bardstown. He was involved in the community and was a youth baseball coach. Ellis was described as goofy, fun-loving man, and his murder is still unsolved. The very next year, on April 21st of 2014, Kathy and Samantha Netherland were brutally murdered inside their own home right there in Bardstown. Kathy was a special education teacher and beloved by the community. Police state not one person had a bad thing to say about this mother and daughter. The two were still grieving the loss of Samantha's father from cancer when Samantha, who was 16 years old, had been stabbed and her throat cut. Her mother, Kathy, had been stabbed and shot. A black car was spotted on surveillance cameras in the area around the time of the murders, but that vehicle was never located and the person driving has never been identified. This double homicide is also still unsolved. On July 3rd of 2015, Crystal Rogers disappeared from Bardstown. This case is probably the most infamous out of this town that once won the Most Beautiful Small Town in America award. Crystal Rogers, formerly known as Crystal Ballard, was a 35-year-old mother of 5 when she went missing. Her mother had reported her missing on July 5th when no one in her family had heard from her in a few days. Crystal's car, which was a red Chevy Impala, was found abandoned with a flat tire at mile marker 14 on the Bluegrass Parkway there in Bardstown. Her keys, phone, and purse were still inside. So just for the fact if she had a flat tire and needed to walk, let's say her cell phone was dead and needed to walk down, why wouldn't she take her purse or her phone with her in this walk? No woman leaves their purse or their cell phone.
And Crystal's case Of the ones that you have discussed so far, Crystal's case is one of the ones that has reached national news level. There was an entire podcast just about Crystal's murder.
Yes, the podcast is called Bardstown. It does
Mhm.
touch briefly on the other murders. Officer
Jason's.
Ellis. Yes.
Jason.
I don't know about the other one. It's an amazing podcast. I would definitely recommend it. Crystal's case also has an entire docu-series on it as well, where they also touched briefly on all the other cases as well, but she's the main focus in that. She's been on Nancy Grace. I think they've been trying to get on Dr. Phil. So her family has been advocates for a very long time, and they will not stay quiet.
And there's been updates as recently as within the last couple of months at the locations that Crystal was last known to have been at.
Exactly, yes, and I will touch on that a bit, but yes,
Sorry.
you're fine. There has been many searches, and I think that's the one that is closest to being solved out of all the ones we're gonna chat about. Crystal's family would state the seat in the vehicle was not adjusted to the way that Crystal would normally have it, which made all of them think right away that Crystal was not the last one driving it. There is so much to this case, and Brooks Hauk, who was Crystal's boyfriend at the time of her disappearance and who happened to be the last one to see her alive. Brooks owned a construction company, and he has a brother on the police force there in Bardstown. Several people around Brooks, including 2 relatives and 1 employee, have been implicated in this case. A man that worked for Brooks, he was charged with 38 counts of perjury for lying on the stand about the whole thing surrounding Crystal's disappearance. And then I didn't know this until researching. Brooks's grandmother was also implicated when she invoked her Fifth Amendment right when she was called to testify in court as well. Authorities reported that whoever was responsible for Crystal's disappearance used this grandmother's vehicle to move her body.
Wow.
Yes. Eventually, the FBI would take over this case, and I think it had a lot to do with the law enforcement, it being a conflict of interest with Brooks's brother being on the force and not making very much headway. There is a lot of criticism around the investigation into Crystal's disappearance, such as Crystal's vehicle being given back to the family after not being properly processed. A few things like that, that obviously the FBI just had to take it over. There has been quite a bit of traction within the last 2 years, Whitney had stated. Searches around Bardstown and raids of the homes of Brooks and his brother have been conducted. However, this case is still unsolved as the recording of this episode. However, like I said, I do believe this one is the closest to being solved. And in turn, I think other ones will be solved as well. And this one is a bit different because it could be in the process of getting solved. But in 2016, a couple was murdered in a neighborhood in Louisville. Linda Leslie was 27 years old, and Julian Ramirez was 32 years old, and they were residents of Bardstown. They were found inside a vehicle. This vehicle had the headlights still on, and Linda was shot multiple times, while Julian was shot once. This went unsolved for quite a few years, and in 2022, a man by the name of Donnie Ashby was indicted on 2 counts of murder. I could not find any information on how they connected or what evidence led police to Donnie, but Donnie is being charged with their murders at this time. He was already incarcerated for unrelated charges, and at least this case seems to be in the process of getting solved. But I would like to know his connection to this couple and the possible connection he has to Bardstown, if any. Did he know Brooks and his brother? So many murders for 13,000 people.
Agreed.
Way more than any other 13,000 town ever has.
Yeah.
And it may be because they're unsolved.
Yeah, but at the very least, if it's because they are unsolved, perhaps some training needs to occur for the police department or something's going on for these to not get closed out.
Exactly. And if we're talking all the way back in 2011, the first one, it is years that these people could get the training they need. So anything that happens, now should be
Mhm.
solving within 4 minutes,
That's a
in
very
my opinion.
specific time frame.
Yes. What is the first thing you do when you wake up? Is it checking your credit score?
Definitely not.
Didn't think so. At Chime, that's exactly what they do. With their secure Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card, you can start to build credit with your own money. Chime reports your payments to credit bureaus to help build your credit over time. Their members see an increase of 30 points on average. All of this with no annual fees, large security deposits, or credit checks.
So start your credit journey with Chime. Sign up takes only 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Get started at chime.com/Cabernet.
That's chime.com/Cabernet.
The Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card is issued by Stride Bank NA, pursuant to a license from Visa USA, Chime checking account, and $200 qualifying direct deposit required to apply for the secured Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card. Regular on-time payment history can have a positive impact on your credit score. Impact to score may vary, and some user scores may not improve. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply except at MoneyPass ATMs and a 7-Eleven or any Allpoint or Visa Plus Alliance ATM.
So finally, we get to the unsolved murder of Tommy Ballard. He was born Thomas Marvin Ballard on January 7th of 1962, and he was born in Louisville, Kentucky, to parents Edward Till and Betty Hammond Ballard. He had quite a few siblings. He has 2 sisters, Teresa and Barbara, and 2 brothers, Roger and Mike. All of them lived there in Bardstown, which blows my mind. Tommy is Crystal Rogers' father and the person that spent every day after she went missing searching and investigating her disappearance. He took advocating to a whole new level. His wife and Crystal's mother, Sherry, stated that Tommy spent all of his time trying to find out what happened to their daughter. Tommy Ballard had 3 kids. He had Crystal, Brooke, and a son, Casey. He also had 8 grandchildren and was described as a devoted family person and a hardworking, do anything for anyone kind of man. Being a military spouse for so long, I have no idea what it is like to have this much extended family in one town. That is, okay, so that's 5 siblings born in, let's say, the 50s and the 60s. All of their children now live in the area, or most of them. And then now we have grandchildren, all in the same town. I know it happens. It's just like a foreign concept to me to all be that close. I have a humongous extended family. I probably have 60 first cousins. No,
Wow.
wow, so many. So obviously, we've all been all over the country forever.
Even as your childhood, y'all didn't stay in one spot. You lived in California, you lived in Oklahoma. You weren't stagnant. Whereas, like my childhood, I spent my whole life in one town and my dad still lives there. So to me, it seems more normal for a whole family to be in one town than for them to be dispersed across the United States.
Exactly. Yeah. It just boggles my mind because I'm not used to that. As far as the day of his murder goes, it was November 19th of 2016. Tommy and his grandson headed out in the early morning hours to hunt on the family's property. Tommy's son, Casey, and his other grandson were also hunting that day, but they went to the opposite side of the property. This property is like a few hundred acres. So they went to one section, Tommy and his grandson went to another section. Just before 8 a.m., the grandson calls his grandma, Sherry Ballard, and states, "Papa has been shot." I could only imagine her heart stopping at that moment. It had been just over a year since her daughter had disappeared. And of course, they feared the worst in that case, to only lose another person she loved more than anything. Tommy Ballard was shot once in the chest and pronounced dead at the scene. Initially, authorities looked at the grandson, who I believe was around 12 years old, but he was ruled out as being the person that shot his grandfather. Police would start investigating. However, they weren't sure if this was a hunting accident or a targeted attack. To keep adding to the devastating loss for this family, in 2018, Crystal's youngest son, who she had with Brooks, was no longer allowed to visit his grandma Sherry. A judge ruled that the relationship between Brooks and his son was more important than the relationship between grandmother and grandson. Sherry had visitation every other weekend with her grandson. He was allowed to come over for the whole weekend. It was court mandated. And this was giving that youngest son time to spend with his siblings. He had 4 other siblings that he was only allowed to see when he went over to his grandmother's house. But a judge ruled that was not in the best interest of this child because Brooks would state that his son would come home after these weekends and he would be uncooperative and sullen. So that put an end to those visitations.
That's so hard on those kids.
I know. And hard on this grandma that literally her oldest daughter is still missing to this day, even though she has been presumed deceased. Then her husband is murdered. And then just right after that, her grandson is taken away and she no longer gets to see him. It's a lot to deal with.
Yes.
Authorities aren't saying anything when it comes to all of these murders. Not sure if they have anything to keep quiet about, but it's been so long that you would think they would give the public something to produce some leads at this point.
One would think.
Yeah. At least authorities changed Tommy Ballard's manner of death from a hunting accident to an actual homicide. Kentucky state troopers stated, and I quote, "If we give our whole case away, what our evidence is, what our statements are from witnesses or anybody else that may have information, when people do come forward to us and we don't know what they know, if we haven't released anything and they tell us stuff that pertains to the case, then we know we're onto something." End quote. Information or evidence that hasn't been released includes info on the bullet casing, the type of gun used, the direction of the shots fired, and people that have been interviewed, just to name a few. So they are not releasing literally anything besides the fact that Tommy's grandson was not the person to do it, accidental or on purpose. The public usually gets some of this information, especially the type of gun used or vehicles seen in the area. I do believe that this helps the police gather new tips and possible leads.
Well, I think that it not only does it alert the surrounding area of, hey, be on the lookout because that you could be in danger if you see this vehicle, but also if you see this vehicle, let us know. We are looking for it. That's more eyes help. More eyes can help.
Yeah. And we know that the police departments are underfunded. They don't have enough people working. We are here to help. Just let us know what you want us to find and we'll look for it.
Especially in a day and age since true crime has turned into the community that it has turned into. We have more armchair detectives willing to say something now than we did 10 years ago, than we did 5 years ago.
Most definitely. And these people that are these armchair detectives, yes, sometimes they cause havoc, but sometimes they have a skill that the police department might not have, or they just happen to have all the time on their hands that the police department doesn't. So this case is high profile along with a lot of other ones there in Bardstown. Could be why they're not anything slip past them because there are people out there. Yes. Or if there is a high enough reward, they will simply blame an ex-boyfriend to get to that money, even though that person has nothing to do with it. So I understand their silence on a lot of these matters, but I feel like if they give us one piece of information, I almost think it should be like on a timetable. If you don't have a suspect within 2 years, you let a piece of information go that way. It can create new traction, new leads, and get the public talking about the case. Sherry Ballard said in an interview that Tommy told her about his suspicions of being followed in the weeks leading up to his death. She believes wholeheartedly that they will know who killed Tommy once she finds out what happened to Crystal. She believes they are connected. And she believes that because Tommy would stop at nothing to figure out what happened to Crystal, and she believes he was getting closer, and that is why someone targeted him. Sherry also stated about her husband, and I quote, "Nothing would have stopped him. He was going to bring our daughter home," which makes me so sad for this whole family. They also believe it is a murder because I'm going to explain the property situation. This is pretty flat terrain, and it is by a highway. Along the highway is a bunch of trees. It's hard to see the highway because of this strip of trees right along that way. As they were investigating, and even a journalist came out like about a year or two later, in this one spot near where Tommy was shot, you can see almost like a cutout, a little area where the limbs had been cut by something, not just snapped, but almost cut, like sawed. And you could see that. And this would be the perfect spot where the murderer, the killer, could easily be in his car on the side of the road, get out and shoot and have a complete clear shot at Tommy standing in this flat field. That is where they believe the person that killed Tommy was at. And that seems like an assassination if I've ever heard of one.
I would agree.
And many people knew that Tommy would be out there hunting on that particular day. Very small town. Tommy was prominent in it. So I believe the person knew he was going to be out there. And obviously, it sounds like sniper stuff to me, but I don't know how like guns really work and what kind can shoot from possibly like 100 yards.
Actually, and you also have to think about the activities that happened. They were out there hunting. People have hunting rifles. Those have scopes. The people have access to weapons for sport that could easily have done this.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially when hunting is so prevalent in the area.
Yes, that's true. Because I guess just thinking about like shooting a deer from that far, it's hard for my mind to be like, oh my God, that's so accurate from that distance because I can't see the toaster on the counter.
And she's had LASIK, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes. And my hands are shaky. There's no way I could shoot a gun at anything and hit it.
That's why it's a sport. It takes talent and aim and practice.
Yeah, very true. There has been very little information released in Tommy's case. Authorities have asked the public, and especially truck drivers that may have been driving on the Bluegrass Highway between mile marker 21 and 24 before 7:30 in the morning on November 19th of 2016. So if you happen to be in that area time and may remember anything, please call authority. Tommy Ballard's father said detectives told him that they were looking back at the case from day one, and they were going step by step through all of the leads and evidence. So that was 2019. Then in October of 2022, so this was just a few months ago, a search was conducted at Brooks's family farm. This farm was about 200 acres, so in my opinion, a massive area to search. FBI stated they found some evidence in connection to Crystal's case, and it was being sent to the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia. But of course, they did not say what they found. We can only hope once this evidence is processed, someone will be charged in not only Crystal's disappearance, but for Tommy's murder as well. But let's not stop there. Bardstown has way too many unsolved homicides for any town, let alone a town this size. And I believe the family farm, Brooks's family farm, was one of the last places Crystal was seen alive. Sherry stated in a recent interview, and I quote, "It's very hard for me to sit and wait, but I know the end result is going to be worth it. So I sit and I wait, and I think if they find who was guilty for Crystal, then I think they will have justice for Tommy too." There is a $20,000 reward available for information that leads to the arrest of Tommy Ballard's killer. And there is a $100,000 reward for information that leads to what happened to Crystal Rogers. The FBI is the investigating agency on Crystal's disappearance, and then the Kentucky State Police is leading the investigation on Tommy Ballard's death. But anyone with information in any of the cases that I mentioned today is asked to call 1-800-CALL-FBI, which is 1-800-225-5324. And they will take that information, pass it on to whoever it needs to go to. I know the agencies they at least say that they're working together. That includes the Bardstown Police Department, the state police, and the FBI. So we will see. But I do believe Crystal's case will be solved. And if you do want a deep dive on crystals, like we said, go to the Bardstown podcast. There's also documentaries online. There is so much out there, and your mind will be warped about why certain people are not in jail already.
How they could possibly all be connected. There's a million theories out there of how every single murder could be connected.
Yes, there is.
Some of them are outlandish.
It's very outlandish. If I had to say any were connected off pure speculation on my part, I would say Officer Ellis, Tommy, and Crystals could be connected. I do not believe the mother-daughter that were brutally murdered in their home was connected. The mannerisms and the way that they were killed were just so different from the other ones.
The victimology was much different.
Yes. Now, I never even knew about the Daniel case in 2011 until I started this. He was killed execution style. That there's not a lot out there on that one. And so that one, I literally have no idea if it could be connected, what it was about, or anything like that. No even theories I have on that case. So time will only tell. But if anyone in this world needs justice, I feel like Sherry Ballard deserves to know what killed her family.
Absolutely.
So,
just by listening to our content, you too are advocating for justice for these families. Thank you for making a difference in their lives as well.
We want to share a few ways you can support us to continue our mission. You can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $1 per month, or a simple rate and review on your favorite podcast platform helps us get in front of someone who may know something.
We will continue traveling state by state, seeking justice, because we will be there no matter where,
no matter who.